Recording in progress.
All right, awesome. So hello, everybody. Welcome to UXLA number 3. I'm going to just briefly share my screen so that everybody can see what's going on. And welcome to UXLA workshop 3. This workshop is going to be focusing on solution ideation, which is personally my favorite part of the design process. I'm Chinmaya. I'm going to be one of your presenters, and
I am Hakan. I am the other presenter.
Also
Welcome, everyone.
ACM Design Co-President.
Yes.
Give him his props.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, welcome to the workshop, and let's get going. So let's set the stage a little bit. So if you've been to a couple of our other workshops, then you might be familiar with the design process that we explained there already, but just in case you aren't. So at this stage of the process, you would have defined the problem you're working on, or the ones that you're trying to solve. To address that problem, you've researched your users and you've made personas out of them. And through those personas, you've identified some of their needs and some of their pain points. Their needs being the things that they would want out of a solution to that problem, and the pain points being the parts of the problem where they're really suffering, the specifics of the problem that are actually bugging them. But once you've got all these insights, what do you do with them? And that is why we're going to ideate. So a lot of you are familiar with like brainstorming. You've probably done it at some point during high school. But ideation is this point right here in the design process. So before this, we've empathized with our users and we've defined the problem based on the insights that we generated through empathizing with them. And empathizing means like doing research on them, interviewing them, having them use different solutions, a bunch of different research methods. From there, we've defined a problem, usually through like a problem statement, something specific that's kind of just anchoring us to and focusing us on what we really need to fix and what our solution is targeting to do. Now we come to ideation. But what is ideation? That's the process where we generate a lot of ideas or solutions for our problem statement or multiple problem statements. And that usually happens through a lot of kinds of brainstorming. So ideation is a really fun part of the process because it gives you liberty to go anywhere with your sort of ideas or your thoughts. As long as they're in some way related to the problem, they're valid to ideate around. And like that can be a really fun process because you get to talk about some really cool stuff and some really zany stuff too. Like some of the suggestions that you come up with can be pretty wacky, but that's kind of where innovation lies. And that's what I'm going to get to. Another cool thing about ideation is that in general, it'll help us take another look at the ideas we take for granted. So like kind of the obvious solutions that we jump to first whenever we hear the problem. We can think about them in a little bit more detail. And we can ideate around, branch off around those and think about more specific parts of those solutions and see where there's like context for change and how that solution would work given our context. And beyond that, we can get a guide to the creative, innovative ones, the ones that most people haven't really thought of. But yeah, but here, we're going to take it step by step. So in general, ideation is a diverging and converging process. So by diverging, I mean that given our problem statement, we go in a bunch of different directions, as wide a range as we possibly can. And converging means that we tend to take all of the ideas we've generated and filter out the bad ones or the ones that might not work. We basically make choices around those ideas and choose what we want to focus on. So.
Kind of sounds like expectation maximization, if anyone here is studying machine learning. Like, anyway.
Yeah.
So let's awesome. Let's start with just like the problem statement. This is almost like if you've ever done the scientific method, you know, your hypothesis, kind of like this, I guess. So you want to make sure that you're asking the right question before you begin so that you kind of set yourself up for success. So a really good metric for asking. So first, like the questions are usually like phrased as how might we, because this is like you're trying to design for possibilities, and not just like narrow down too much into like what exactly you want to do. You just want to like think from the user's perspective, like what could we do for them, uh, and then have that be the question. So you want to balance like the general and specific, as it says here, because when your question is too broad, then there's like a lot, the design space that you could use to solve this question is very large, and it becomes a lot harder to localize, especially like with a larger team of people. And when your design question is too narrow, it's a sign that you've kind of already decided on a solution, and you're not really like generalizing the problem enough to allow for other competing solutions. And so you kind of remove the creativity from the process. So for instance, if we're trying to ask a question about like how to present music in a way that might be like kind of funny related to the user's taste, a too broad question would be to scope out too much and say how might we take a new approach to the music listening experience, because that could imply like a lot of things. Um, a too narrow question would be like, how might we create an app that analyzes your music taste and roasts you for it? Because if you kind of tell like that question is loaded with the answer, like by designing a thing that roasts your music taste, right?
By
But
the way,
the
that's
right,
an actual like product. That's an
yeah,
actual
yeah,
product.
it's like a website, right?
Yeah.
It never got it to work for me. It said like it errored out when I tried to get my
Apparently, I'm
Spotify.
31% basic. But anyway.
Oh, really? Oh, it's okay. That's less than half. So that must be better than if they're like weighing it by mean percentage of people, you're better than most people,
Yeah,
essentially.
that's true. But yeah, continue. Okay.
And then how might we assess users, how might we help users assess their music taste in a more humorous way? It scopes out the question enough that you have a lot more design space, but you're still like putting like the humorous into it. So you know that that's like one of your goals, and that also keeps it from getting too wide. So that's sort of like the Goldilocks of user experience. Next slide.
Yeah. So once we've made sure that our problem statement is the actual problem statement we want to look at, and the how might we questions are specific enough to give us a sense of direction, but broad enough to let us actually ideate around them, our next step, and step one in this process, is diverging. So here, the idea is to generate as many ideas as possible of as wide a range as possible. So that's why we're going for volume and we're going for range. And ideally, this best happens in a group, because multiple perspectives means no one person ever looks at an idea or like a problem exactly the same way. So you have a higher chance of capturing a wider range of ideas if you do it with somebody. Hell, you could like start on a problem statement, invite your mom, invite your sister, invite your dad, invite your friends, your roommates. It doesn't matter who the group is, as long as like you could do it in a group, but you could do it on your own as well. Like that, there's no rule saying you can't. So the point of diverging is to get through the obvious ideas first. So any problem is going to have like an obvious thing that somebody's probably already tried. And like, it's valuable to get through some of those, because that way you know what your legit options are. But once you get through all those obvious ideas, once you start for options, that's when the creative ideas will come. And your pain points in your problem statement, that's going to be your North Star. That's going to guide you, and that's going to keep your sense of direction to where exactly you want to go with it. Because if you don't use your pain points in your problem statement in order to guide you, then you'll start just going off scope, and there's no telling like what your range could be then. Like you could start with ideating around the music experience and end up with like video buffering, and like that's kind of not what we want to do. So a lot of creative ideas, I don't know how many of you like, or how often you end up engaging in the creative process, but a lot of creative ideas happen under constraint when you add like an artificial limit on yourself. So here are a few tips for some more creative ideas. One would be adding an arbitrary constraint to the problem. Like, for example, if you reduce your user base that you're trying to think about, like who are my user, like for example, what are some ideas that would work for the problem statement for users with impaired vision? What are some, like, that's why like designing for accessibility is a really great way to create a constraint and like ideate around that, because it forces you to think about a lot of very different perspectives. Another one is to mash up a couple of different ideas into one. Like if you've seen any like spy movie, you probably seen the shoe that converts into a secret telephone, and that's honestly a legit idea that's probably come up in ideation session, because that a lot of like ideas are basically like combinations of two existing metaphors that exist already. And the third tip I have is to go for the worst possible idea. Those can yield some very interesting thoughts, and like think about like stuff that'll probably get you fired, the stuff that's probably not ethical or is just so dumb that people wouldn't really suggest it. Now, like I know you've all experienced something that you thought was dumb at first, but then you looked deeper into it and you like saw the hidden genius inside it. That's the idea with this tip, where like you look at something dumb, but then that could sprout an idea that's maybe not so dumb, but also something that nobody would have thought of if they hadn't considered the dumb thing first. So yeah, these are just some tips to diverge on, but there are so many other ways you could do it. It's really up to you. The key is just to go for a really broad range and try to generate as many as possible. And ideally do it under like a time frame of some kind, so that you also add that constraint to yourself, and that pressurizes you in order to keep going and start generating. And it gives you a defined endpoint. But yeah, I'm going to move on. Okay, so here are a couple ways that you could hold a group ideation session, but these are by no means the only ones. This list is not exhaustive at all. One is your traditional brainstorm, where you all gather in a group in a room and you just put down ideas like on post-its or something, and you start building off each other. Now that's kind of an in-person process, and it gives you the advantage of having like really rapid live feedback. Now, the second thing you could do is crowdstorming or like e-storming. So the idea is that a group will generate ideas over like social media or email. Now, this is good for remote work, which all of us are doing now. So this is kind of our main options if we ever wanted to ideate. But you can ask the audience you're designing for as well through this. Like you don't have to just be limited to people outside the user space that you're targeting. You can literally ask the people that you want to help, because they'll also have some opinions about the kinds of things they'll want. And those can be really valuable to narrow down. And social media gives you the advantage of reach. You don't have to be in the same room to get their perspective on it. And now a third way to hold a group ideation session is by storyboarding. Now, this is a little bit longer and more in depth than either of the other two, but it's a really good for visual representation. You've all seen storyboards where people like sketch out or draw out ideas and they put them in a sequence or a narrative in order to tell kind of a story of how somebody like starts interacting with something, what happens, and then there's a conclusion. So you can express like user behaviors in the same way, or like ideas for how a user might work with your product, or like work with your app, your design, anything. While this would take longer, it's really good for like understanding detailed process or flow ideas. But yeah, these are not the only ways to hold a group ideation session. There are so many more that I haven't even touched base on, but I'll be sharing a link to some of those in the last slide of this presentation. So yeah, I'm going to move on.
Awesome. So now you have a lot of ideas and you're doing your expectation part of your ML model. Now it's time for the maximization. Now it's time to converge your ideas. Have you ever seen the like software triangle where you tell your business guy like choose two, and the top is like speed, the right is like complexity, and the left is like price or something? I forgot exactly if that was what it is, but like, and you can only choose two. This is sort of like a similar concept. You want to, except this time you're trying to choose three, right? So basically you take all of your ideas and you just filter out things that don't meet your criteria, and the best like domains of criteria that you want to consider, or at least like, you know, broadly speaking, are desirability, feasibility, and viability. So feasibility is just like, how possible is it to actually build this? And if so, like, what are the costs? Feasibility in like your classic like I guess, web app environment, which many of you are familiar with. It's just like, let's say this feature, there's no API for it, and like it looks cool, but it would take a lot of like engineering hours to build. Like that's your feasibility part. The viability is a little bit more businessy. So it's like, should it be built and does it make sense long term? So this is kind of like, say like you're trying to target um like a specific problem with your app or whatever your solution for whatever, and you don't want to kind of muddle the experience with too many extraneous things. That's kind of a viability problem, like what you want your users to be sort of using the thing for and what they should be focused on. So this is kind of like a more business perspective. And then desirability is just like, do users want it? And is it a solution and must have or a nice to have? So this is definitely like the most like down to earth of the three. You're trying to look for things that will add value to your user's experience. So for instance, like if your door doesn't have a handle, but it'd be really cool if it had a nice window, you should make the handle first. The door needs a handle, but the window is cool, but it's like a nice to have. So yeah, that's convergence.
I love that like door example, honestly.
Thank you. Thank
It's a
you.
very elegant way of describing it. But yeah, like Haki said, these are fields or domains that you're considering. They tend to align to different aspects of whatever product you're building. So desirability aligns with your users, and that's the most UXy part of it. Feasibility is very techy. It's about like technology constraints. Your like developers or architects are going to really raise some concerns about feasibility. And viability is more of a business concern, like Haki said. But yeah, I'll move on. The next step here would be feature prioritization. Ideally, through this divergence and convergence process, you would have like filtered out some ideas that you don't really need or ideas that aren't useful to you. And you might have even like grouped some ideas into themes that you could build out into actual features that you can list out. And that's what's called a feature list. But the thing is, the real world that we work in, we don't have abundant time and we don't have abundant money and we also don't have abundant energy. So we kind of have to prioritize inside all of these constraints. You prioritize features for both your actual design, so your users would know what to focus on, and you would spotlight those features more than you might others. And you'd also prioritize some features for your actual, actually by extension, you'd prioritize those features for your workflow as well, putting in more effort, time, and maybe money into working on those features that you really want to focus on. So there are a lot of models to choose from in order to decide this. And each model gives you a slightly different insight into how you're prioritizing. These by no means, again, are by no means exhaustive. You can have so many other models, but these are kind of the central three that I've been seeing a lot. So the first one would be an impact effort matrix. This one's pretty simple. It's literally graphing out different features on like whether it's high or low impact, and correspondingly whether those features are high or low effort. If it's low impact and low effort, then why would you do it? I mean, there might just not be a reason to do it like immediately. If it's high effort but low impact, you're going to need to think about it a little bit. It's going to be thankless, but it might be important. High impact and high effort, that's going to take a little bit of planning. It'll take some strategy. It's something that will do a lot for your overall like design or your overall project, but it's going to be very high effort. So you need to structure that out a little bit so you can actually tackle it feasibly. Now, a high impact and a low effort solution, or like a high impact, low effort feature, that's kind of our dream. That's like low hanging fruit. It's a quick win. We can do it, knock it out really quickly, and suddenly we have something like actually tangible to work with. That's kind of what we're dreaming of. So that's the impact effort matrix. The Kano model tells you something a little bit different. Whereas the impact effort matrix was more about rationing your own effort into what's going to be high impact and low impact. The Kano model is more about what users expect. So if you see this green curve here, this curve is labeled delighters. So these are your attractive features that users aren't necessarily expecting. So you don't really have to invest in it that much. It doesn't have to be super well executed, but the fact that users aren't expecting it anyway means that even if it's not super well executed, they'll be delighted when they actually see it. So not having it isn't going to actually like affect your product too much, but having it will like take it to the next level. Whereas basic expectations are kind of the opposite. So those are features that users have come to expect, where like investing in them means that like it's users aren't going to thank you for it because they're expecting that out of a solution. But if you don't invest in them, they'll notice and they'll be like, why is this thing not there? So those are basic expectations. Right in the middle of those are the satisfiers. And now those are like pretty linear between satisfaction and the amount of time and effort you invest into it. So, or like the grade of the execution. So satisfiers are like, if you invest high effort into it, they'll perform well. If you invest low effort to it, they're probably not going to. So those are very predictable in terms of like how you want to, yeah, those are very predictable. And like one example of a satisfier could be the pricing model of Uber, or like another would be like how well a fridge cools your thing down, or like a fridge cools your food down. I don't know why I said thing. But yeah, that's the Kano model. Now, the third one I want to talk about is the RICE score. And no, it's not the one that you're thinking of. This RICE score stands for reach, impact, confidence, and effort. Reach is usually quantified by how many users that feature is going to affect. Impact will be quantified by how impactful would this be to each user's life. You could grade that on a pretty relative scale, like 3 being maximal impact, like 0.5 or 0.25 being little to no impact. Confidence will be like, how confident are you in your estimates? Or like, how confident are you that this feature is going to work? Meanwhile, effort is what you think it is. It's the amount of work that you're going to put into it. So a RICE score is generally your reach, impact, and confidence scores divided by your effort that you're putting in. And you can quantify this however you like. But the important thing is this is a relative score so that you can decide which features out of your entire set to prioritize first and which ones to put to the bottom. So you can use any one of these, or you could use all 3 of these, or you could use an entirely different model. That's up to you. The important thing is feature prioritization is going to give you a better sense of direction for what to focus on when you're actually starting to build a solution out. And that's what I'm going to jump onto next. Actually, Hockey will. Sorry.
That's right. So now you have a prioritization list of your ideas. And now it's the right thing to do would be to try organizing them, because you know that you're going to be making one cohesive thing in the end, not like a bunch of individual ideas that all like are isolated, right? They have to be incorporated. So now you go about, so let's say you identified some low-hanging fruit that some of your users want, and you also have some basic expectations that you've identified. Now you're going to try to consolidate these into like a cohesive experience. So one of the ways to do that is in information architecture. Those of you who are learning object-oriented models, like these are basically the same things. But yeah, so here in this example, we're modeling a home page that is sort of like, I think it's kind of an Airbnb style app, or like maybe a travel app of some sort, where your homepage has a number of different components. It looks very Reacty, and has a bunch of different states that that component can be in, or different components within them. And so these are kind of informed by, like, say you had an idea that was like, it'd be cool if you could sort the places to go to in my travel app by activity, because I know that like users are like, I like rock climbing. Where do I go to rock climb? This is where you would say, okay, how are we going to present that experience? Let's do it in our destination component. So we are nesting it underneath the sort by country kind of like hierarchy. So you'd be doing stuff like that. And then next we have, oh, sorry, you can keep going. Oh,
Hold on.
you unmuted,
Just
so
wait.
I thought you were gonna say something.
Oh no, I'm just trying to go next. Okay, got it.
Oh, awesome. So user flows is now the other perspective. Now you have your sort of object-oriented model of like how everything fits into itself. Now you want to look from the user perspective and see what are the steps they have to do to accomplish what they want. So those are called user flows. And that's like when you put your ideas in the context of behaviors and decisions. So here we have a starting point where we're kind of like deciding on a trip in the same sort of travel app. And all of the diamonds represent decisions, like where the user has to, or like places where the the user flow branches. So if the user doesn't have an account, first they have to register. But if they do, then they log in. And then we kind of like join back. And then we're going to be creating a new journey, adding some dates, choosing our location. And you can see earlier we were talking about like, let's say we wanted the user to be able to filter by activity. Now it also manifests itself in the user flow. So you'll see after the choose preset trips or create new, we have the user selects activity also there in your user flow. And that's kind of what you want to see. You want to be sure that like any ideas that you kind of came up with at the ideation point, you're making sure that they're being utilized at the right times in the user flows that you expect them to be used, and that they're like intuitive for the user. So here, this is kind of intuitive because the user is in the mode of like planning a trip, and they're kind of like localizing on what kind of trip they want. And so it makes sense that you should be able to sort by country and activity at this point. And yeah, so you kind of do this, and it does take a little bit of time if you have a more complex app, but it's good because it forces you to identify like pain points early on in the process before you like build a lot of things. So that's like kind of the utility of user flows. Do you press
Yeah,
the right
sorry,
arrow button, I
I'm
guess?
bad at Zoom.
No, it's
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah. Great explanation, Haki. I'm going to move on to the next slide now. And I guess yeah.
Oh yeah, so lo-fi prototyping. So now lo-fis are kind of what we call wireframes that have minimal amount of colors and like details, and you're just trying to see like the juxtaposition of components on the page, the like order of actions that user will do. You're just trying to like make sure that you're able to identify everything that you've labeled in your user flows and your object hierarchies like pretty quickly, because this is going to be where you'll be iterating a lot, because you'll have a lot of different ideas for your how to bring things together in the lo-fis before you move on to your hi-fis. So yeah, you can think about this like blueprinting, or if you ever like worked in AutoCAD, this is sort of like the point where before you extrude all of your lines from the floor plan, you're like in the top-down view. I don't know if any other CADers are here. Um, but yeah, this will also like be another kind of like with user flows. This is also a place where you'll identify a lot of problems, because now you're actually visualizing things on the page. So a common thing to discover at this point of design is like that there's not enough room for things above the fold, or the fold is like what you call like where the bottom of the user's screen, whether it be phone or uh, like desktop is. You'll often like, this is the first point at which you put everything in a visual design language. So that's where all the visual problems will kind of manifest themselves first. And yeah, this is also a good point to test, because if your users can't figure out your lo-fi, then it's likely that your hi-fi won't do too much better. So it's a good point to get a lot of early feedback from people. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Haki. And here's your final step. Once you've gone through all of those previous steps, from like diverging, converging, feature prioritization, actually all the way back to checking your problem statement. And once you get through like organizing all of your information and like prototyping it out in like a lo-fi sense, here's your next step. Just do it all again. Now, keep in mind that testing is going to give you new insights to act on, just like Aki said. So you're going to need to bring them back to the drawing board. There's certain things that you might have taken for granted, users are going to point out to you. Certain things that you might have assumed about a user, users are going to correct you. You could go, these insights could bring you back to the information architecture, could bring you back to the brainstorming stage. It could even bring you back all the way to redefining your problem statement itself. So you might have to do a little bit more research. But that basically depends on what those insights are that you learned. If one insight would be that users are finding it tough to understand the organization of your app, that's when you'd go back to the information architecture. If users are confused as to why something is there or why something isn't there, you might want to go back to the brainstorming stage. If users just have a general sense that, oh, this isn't really solving my problem, like this is just kind of solving an entirely different one, then you're going to have to redefine your problem statement a little bit too. So, but it's okay if this happens. Keep in mind that design is iterative. It's perfectly fine to keep trying until you get it right. Nobody ever does it like right on the first try. Like it's always going to lead. Design is a process of making mistakes. If you're not making mistakes in your design, you're not going hard enough. But like when you're like iterating, it can be hard to tell when you're done. And honestly, that's a judgment call you have to make. Like generally the heuristic I use is whenever you think the product is usable enough, that's when you can move on to hi-fis and you can sort of work on like a minimum viable sort of product or minimum viable prototype. Because once you have that MVP, that's when you can start like really testing out like the actual design, and you might be able want to iterate from there too. But yeah, this is entirely a judgment call. If you feel like you have more to talk about or more to research, then you don't have to go on to hi-fi prototyping from here. So like, yeah. But yeah, that's basically the last step. And now we're going to take you into a real fun brainstorming session. Haki, would you like to explain what we're about to do?
So we are about to tackle a problem that is very applicable to everyone here. At least I'm like looking through the participant list and I think this is applicable to everyone here. So let's get into it. So the problem statement is, how can professors get students more engaged during Zoom lectures? And this is a really fun one because it forces you to think from the other perspective. Usually we are like, oh my Lord, how do I pay less attention to this lecture? I am so bored. But let's think about it from the other perspective. How can professors do this? And what I want you to do is either unmute and give ideas or just put it in the chat. And I'm thinking like we can try, if you have anything visual in mind, we can even try like mocking things up on this screenshot right now.
Literally just like go ahead and study the Zoom interface that you're using to tune into this workshop. Like that can be a point of starting. So what we're going to do is just take a minute or two, like write down whatever ideas you can think of based on like how professors might be able to get students a little bit more engaged during some Zoom lectures. And what we're going to do is, if you were here at the last workshop, you might have been introduced to this tool. It's one that like one of our lovely designers, Annie, introduced to me. So this tool is called Whimsical. And it's great for basically any stage of like the UX design process, particularly the ideating and like the research stages. So this is basically going to be our sticky note board. So like literally comment this stuff in the chat, or like I'm not fully sure how to see the chat from here though.
I can
okay, wait, I got it. I got it.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we just talk as well?
You can talk, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
there's no
talking is
pressure.
better actually.
I guess like my first thing is like the interface is very drab. The colors aren't energetic, and you know, it's just like dark grays on black, and it's not very inviting. And what I have noticed is that for professors that have done it well, when they turn on their videos, they're always in a very, very bright setting, or, and they generally those professors generally have very colorful personalities too. So like Korf or Majid, like the video ratio like on in those classes were always really great.
Oh, wow.
Because I mean, part of it's just the personality, but I feel like their personality adds color to like what would otherwise be really like, a low energy application.
I heard Majid roast you too, right? Does he do that? Or do you like roast the class?
Not really.
Oh,
Maybe
not
a
really?
little bit.
Oh, interesting. Did you have to unmute during the final?
Yes.
Oh, that is interesting. Okay, cool. You know what this reminds me of actually? Just like melatonin production. Like your body like does not wake up when you are looking at darker things, and when you look at brighter things or open your windows, you tend to wake up. Maybe that's part of it. Oh, I always thought, I don't know if that's actually true though.
That's a valid idea.
I think it's like possibly also like culture setting. You hear this when you go to founder school or any of those startup incubator things where they talk about like when you're making a new, company, a startup, like the first people who are, joining the company kind of set the culture. And the thing with like Zoom lectures is like, or I guess like the thing with like a classroom is that like the culture is sort of set by one person, the professor. So it's even more so important for that professor to like set it in the sort of right way. So if they have like a very maybe like not very explanatory, inviting personality, then in a more like high effort required to pay attention environment like Zoom, it like will carry over a little less.
I like Daniel's idea of like adding a participation leaderboard tab.
Gamification.
Gamification. Okay. You know what? I'm going to add this as a general sort of idea. Actually, I'm going to make this a stack. So if we want to like idea around gamification in general, we can just do that. So
yeah, you could put participation leaderboard in that. Hannah said more on polling. I think you can poll though, right?
Yeah, but I think using it more often makes things more interactive.
I wish you could poll from the app. I think you have to like set up polls in the somewhere else, because I'm like a administrator or something and I can't like find a poll right now. There isn't one, right, Muthu?
Yeah, you have to set it up like beforehand, which is annoying.
Something I was thinking about is like, how do I say this? Like for people who prefer to interact without their video on, having more ways that they could. So, you know how in Figma, like your name is attached to your cursor, and when everyone's on the same Figma, you see like everyone's cursors everywhere. And you know how, has anyone taken a class where the professor made everybody do Mentimeter things? Has anyone heard of Mentimeter?
I have not. Could you explain it?
Okay, so I took CS 130 with Myeong Kim, and she likes Mentimeter, which is a site that like you set up questions ahead of time, and then people do them anonymously, and then it'll display a live updating feed of like the average of answers. And she would make us do these to like answer questions, and then she would go over the questions at the end. I feel like those increased participation. It was just I think her questions weren't really worded that easily, so they were kind of hard. But if you applied like easier questions to answer en masse to Mentimeter, I think that was a good idea.
Yeah, I feel like you could call that external tools. Like last quarter, I had a discussion where we did Kahoots every week, and that was like very interactive.
fact, I'm gonna bring this to gamification. Honestly,
Ah,
and I
if
know
you get
you're
more points for doing
so
it, then yeah.
yeah. So Hannah, I know your suggestion to make participation 50% of the grade was a meme, but this is diverging. Meme suggestions are allowed, so I'm adding it.
Oh God.
Well, I'm not tracked then. What if we add in a jarring sound button? Like the person just presses sound and a jarring sound appears. Like Professor Nossenberg does sometimes with like jump scares, but what if you just had the built-in?
That's
Interesting.
interesting.
That would definitely increase participation, if only to get the professor to, or the students to tell the professor to stop doing making the drawing sound.
That's interesting. Okay.
Like,
You know what
remember,
oh yeah, sorry.
remember our like tips to like diverge. That counts as a worst possible idea.
Oh,
But it's still an idea. So thank you for that. That's dope.
thank you, Maxwell. Wait, I was gonna say Maxwell's idea reminds me of like I had this dream once where I was the professor and nobody was like paying attention. Everyone was on their phone or something. So I just like randomly said like, okay, Google, turn off my phone. And then I said, hey Siri, turn off my phone. And then everyone's phones in the class is turned off. And I was like, and then I have your attention. Oh, so I thought that was kind of funny. Of course, you can't really do that over Zoom because what if they are watching the Zoom on their phone? Then that would be a problem.
Daniel also brought up another pretty interesting one, like calling people out. Literally, I took CS 180 last quarter, and my professor, Dr. Sarzadeh, he did this really well, where like when you were attending the lecture, he'd literally mention a random person by name and ask them like a question or like a confirmation of what he was saying. So it ended up getting people to perk up and pay attention because they didn't know when they were going to be called on. So calling people out, like, it's a behavioral thing, but it works.
I think another one that's like kind of mean is to choose to not record your classes so people like are forced to show up.
God. Oh God.
That's a very anti-international student way of doing things.
Yeah, I do not like rock with that. I came here for like I was in India for like the last 6 months. No, thank you. I don't want to take classes at 2 a.m. Yeah.
No one does, yeah. I was also gonna say like you could call people out. You could also have people call people out. If you guys remember popcorn from high school.
Yeah.
So I was thinking like maybe you could, this is a little bit easier in a smaller classroom environment, but it'd be really memey to see like a person in like a 300 person seminar, like make the students do popcorn. Like imagine, oh, okay. And like the other thing I was thinking about is like back at like the sort of like how to get people participating who don't have their camera or mic on. Like I was thinking about if you could have your lecture slides be in some kind of format that's like collaborative-ish. So instead of people having only the chat box to like deal with, they could maybe like on Google Slides, they could like add a comment directly in context on something that they're not sure about and then have the professor answer there to like make it even more like low effort required to answer questions like silently. So that was something I was thinking about. Same with like Figma, like you know how Figma has like the comment button where you could just place a comment pin anywhere. That might be nice because sometimes it's hard to like, you're like, professor, could you go back a slide? And then you have to like describe the problem. Instead, it could be cool if like you could just ask the question within the framework of the lecture. So that's what I was thinking.
So like basically commenting on like a live shared screen presentation sort of.
Oh, I was gonna say like on the lecture document or like on the lecture slides in context. Yeah. So that's what I was thinking. Cause like I know that, you know, it's hard to describe, you know, let's say like you have a question on something and you only are using the chat, you have to like explain a bunch of things first for them to like know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And with
Now-
chat, like you have fewer like human cues that allow you to identify like what someone is saying. So just something I was thinking about.
Wait, could you repeat that, Hockey? Sorry.
Oh, so like say like like we like our generation has adapted to this the best out of like many, but when you're sorry, 1 second.
Oh yeah. While Hockey takes care of that.
Like on
Okay.
that,
Hannah, you meant. Oh, sorry.
but on like the track of like interaction.
Sorry. Okay. I was saying that when you're texting, you like lose something called prosody. Do people here know what prosody is? Anyone?
No.
Okay, so prosody is like the cantor of your sentences. It's sort of like
Oh
the
wait. Like how prosy it is?
no, it's kind of I don't know if that's the same thing as what I'm thinking of, but it's like the speed and pitch and other things related to your sentence that indicate like your meaning. So for instance, like in a lot of European languages, you can ask a question by just raising your pitch at the end of the sentence, like is she single?
Mhm.
Right? Instead of like or like you are right, or instead of like you are right, you know what I mean? So you lose prosody, and you also lose like something important that happens in lectures is like when you invite students to answer a question, like if there's too many students, like nobody volunteers. And it's because it's like hard for students to like come up with like the right answer with enough confidence that they can like say it in front of the whole class. So that's why when students unmute, they'll like ask like kind of like slowly. They're like, I think it's like M, but not really sure. You like lose that in text. And so that's why like even if you have you know, text, like if like students are not like interested in using the mic to ask questions, then it will become harder for you to uh get like information about how confident they are in their answers, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Actually, that kind of leads me.
Yeah.
Actually, Max, you were Maxwell.
Yeah.
Sorry, whichever you prefer.
So I mean,
yeah,
on
you were
the same
talking
vein
about-
of like getting feedback and cues, like the problem with like Zoom reactions is that you have to scroll down to like wake up the bar and then open it and then click like thumbs up or happy or celebration or whatever, or you have to like type it in chat if you don't want to show your face, or you have to turn on your mic and talk. So that's an extra barrier there between being able to give feedback when a professor asks for it, and actually it's like a really awkward gap, or people just don't answer at all. So some way to, if people don't want to have camera on, maybe like the Zoom, like your camera can like detect if you have your thumbs up, or if you're or like smiling or shaking your head, and then just translating that into a reaction if it's at all feasible.
Okay, that's actually a really interesting idea. Yeah. So like automatic.
Wait, can I have a link
camera-
to the whimsical? I can paste some stuff in too.
Yeah, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. This will require you to like Google sign in, but anyone can like just do it in a matter of seconds if you'd like to be on this document too.
Awesome, thank you.
Let me just check if there are any sharings. Okay, I think this should be share fine. So Mac, you were saying automatic camera detection of your face.
Or just face, or like maybe if you have your hand up or your thumbs up, like, and then just translate into like one of the reactions that they have.
Yeah, it could translate into reactions. It could even like translate into like automatically turning your camera on if you want to talk.
Okay, I think it says I don't have access to the page.
Oh, that's weird. Hold on. Okay, there you go.
Oh, awesome. Gracias.
That's weird. I'm going to add edit. Anyone with the link should be able to
Okay,
edit.
I'm able to come. I like
be able to
attended
access
this
that.
thing called Tree Hacks, which is like the Stanford hackathon last week. Let's see if I could paste in an image. They have this their own thingy called Oye. Oh man, this is really big.
Big.
Yeah, but it was like some Stanford startup for like their own video platform, and they have like a bar at the very bottom called reactions, and you can like at any point click any of these or type in a reaction, and it kind of like floats up to the top and then like disappears after a while. So like during the auditorium part, everyone was like spamming all the emojis, and it kind of like made me think about like that's sort of like a closer to what you would do, you know, because like reactions in Zoom, you have to like click them on and then you have to click them off, I think. But really, like when you react to something in real life, you sort of transiently change your mood for a small portion of time and then revert back to homeostasis. So maybe like, you know, like Maxwell's idea is probably even more natural than this, but anything that just like does not have like object permanence and is related to reaction is probably closer.
Aki, add that as a note. Oh, also, Hannah, I didn't miss what you said earlier about like adding a more on-screen interactive elements. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, either through chat or voice, if you feel comfortable? Because like, do you have any ideas for like specific interactive elements for it?
I also like William's idea of the full emoji set. So I can spam my fence emojis. It's my favorite emoji.
Actually, I have an idea based off the popcorning, which is like a very specific like feature idea, which would be literally like a popcorn button on like the Zoom bottom bar. So essentially, this popcorn button would forcibly unmute a random person in the lecture.
Oh my God. We are going balls deep. Force unmute.
Unmute
random made person. It force random unmute. So
oh my God.
Random person in lecture.
Zoom mad light hours. Imagine someone's like, I feel like the issue with a lot of these is sort of like, you can't always rely on people having a good mic and no background noise and like a webcam. Like my laptop here on the side, this one does not have like a working webcam because like the wire that goes to the hinge that connects it broke. So I'm actually on my Mac now.
Oh boy.
And my professors last quarter when I was using it were like, you know, you have to like be on your we have to do the final exam if everyone's videos on, but you also have to take photos of your final exam and send them to us. So I was using my phone as my webcam, but I was like, can I please like turn off my webcam when I take photos, because or else I'm just gonna show my answers in my like little video feed, right? So they let me do that, but it like, you know, these things happen. Sometimes you're like at a lower income household.
Yeah.
You only have a family computer. It's like a desktop PC, no webcam, no mic. Like these things happen. So
this could be an opt-in then.
Yeah. Opt-in is like a good, more inclusive, model for these sorts of things. I was just gonna say like the biggest pain point with adding like new features that make more sophisticated usages of like mic and video is like these cases, you know, that are common. I was also going to show. Oh yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I had one more idea, and then I think we're running late, low on time, so we can like go to the final slide. This is more breakout room oriented. So like, I'm pretty sure you've been in some breakout rooms where people have just like immediately like video off and unmuted or like muted, and just no one wants to talk to each other. So like the host might be able to send prompts remotely to every breakout room to force them to like
make
engage with each other.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, wait, can you?
But maybe like the announcements like disappear after like a few seconds. So I guess like a permanent form of it, I guess.
Maybe just like if like the host can like send a message that's like broadcast through the chat, so it's like permanently there at least. So Those will just disappear after like 5 seconds. So.
True.
So host sends. All right, yeah. Host sends message global chat. But yeah, with that, I think we'll wrap up because I'm very cognizant that it's like 7 now. So, but we got some really interesting ideas down, and this was pretty fun. We got to like go to some pretty weird places.
Wait, really quick, look at the Oye screenshot at the bottom left. The other thing Oye does is you can put your face on like different things.
Yeah.
So, oh, bye, Danny.
That'd be very fun.
But yeah,
But
it's like kind of cool.
So yeah, I'm going to bring you to the end. Congratulations, guys. You reached the end. Now reality can do whatever you want with the power of ideation. But yeah, here's some, you can join our ACM Design Facebook, and I put some relevant links that I kind of used when I was building this presentation, but also I was like studying, and these are some great resources to understand a little bit more about ideation, some free tools you can use. Whimsical, which I just showed you, Figma, which I made this, we all make this presentation, and basically any UI on. And honestly, good old pen and paper. Like, I like using Post-its. I'm a very old school guy. But like, you can do whatever you like. There are so many more free tools than this that you, or there are even some paid ones like a mirror board. But yeah, that's up to you. Okay, I think we can stop recording, but thank you so much for coming. I've been Chinmaya. He's been Haki. We've been your hosts, and it's been a pleasure to serve you.